What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast with Justin and Brandon. I'll admit it, we are recording this a week early because I'm going out of town, and so it is a week before the Japanese Grand Prix. We know there's rumors swirling around, so theoretically, if Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson end up switching seats, that happened after we recorded this, so you can't hold us if we make some wild prediction and that hurts it. But anyways, we're here to predict the Japanese Grand Prix. We're surviving a week with no Formula One by looking ahead to the next weekend. Brandon, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. There's a lot of rumors going on. Suzuka is an amazing track. Who knows what could happen? So I'm feeling great. I'm pumped.
Yeah, I really, my mind is all over the place going into this podcast because it is currently the Tuesday after the Chinese Grand Prix. And like for the past hour, rumors have been swirling about Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson. So before we jump into our predictions, just give me like 30 seconds. Should they switch? How do you feel about that move?
I mean, my reaction still is that I don't think they should switch. I think that would be a knee-jerk reaction. I think, like I said in our podcast previously, I think that energy focused on getting the car to be more drivable across, a wider range of drivers rather than literally just Max Verstappen would probably be effort better focused than taking Liam out of the car, throwing Yuki in there and seeing what he can do. So I feel like the fate of Yuki Tsunoda will probably be the same because as we have seen with many drivers across the years, but more recently, specifically Sergio Perez. I mean, Sergio is not a bad driver. I know we kind of dogged on him at times in the podcast, but that was only because of the results he produced, not because of he's not a quick driver. Because he is a quick driver. He has a lot of experience in Formula One, but I think that car just over time got harder and harder to drive for somebody who isn't Max Verstappen. So my initial reaction, don't swap him. Give Liam at least one more race.
Yeah, I mean, we could be about to see the death of two drivers' career. I mean, this could be it for Liam Lawson's confidence, and he never recovers like we saw with Daniel Kvyat. And then Yuki Tsunoda, we could be throwing him into a car that he's unable to drive, and it's the same result, except he's getting P17, and we see him ruin any chances of getting a seat down the road. But it would be so funny to me if Yuki Tsunoda was the solution to their problems, and they've had him just this whole time and they didn't sign him because of the Honda leaving drama and all of that stuff. That would be so funny to me if they put him in and he like wins his home Grand Prix and he's like the next Red Bull GOAT. That would be hilarious.
That would be absolutely hilarious. And, it'd be pretty fitting for that to happen, for them to pass on Yuki for like 5 years and then for him to like come in and do an amazing job. That would be perfect.
Oh man, and I bet Netflix are just drooling right now over Yuki Tsunoda potentially getting a Red Bull seat before his home Grand Prix. So whatever happens, wishing Yuki the best at his home race, hoping this isn't the end of Liam Lawson's career. Who knows? Maybe we see Sergio Perez back in the sport sooner than we thought. But whatever happens with Red Bull, that happened in the future from this episode, so don't hold us to any of those predictions. Let's jump right into our predictions for the Japanese Grand Prix, starting with our podium pusher of the weekend. So, Brandon, who is your podium pusher prediction for the Japanese Grand Prix?
My podium pusher, it's going to be Max Verstappen. I think Max is going to have a great weekend. Been very consistent the first 2 rounds of the year. I don't expect that to stop because he simply is Max Verstappen. And Max has performed very well in Japan in the past. It's a track that is a lot of drivers' favorites, and I think it's one of Max's favorites as well. He's won a championship here. So I think Max is going to have a great weekend. I don't know if he'll end up winning the race. That Red Bull still seems to be a step back, in my opinion, but crazier things have happened. So
Yeah, we've seen Max Verstappen win with not the fastest car before, and if he does win, he's surely locking in podium pusher of the weekend. Max does not care who his teammate is. He's just going to drive that car and do what he does every weekend. My podium pusher of the weekend, I have gone with George Russell. I think George has been having the most underrated season of this year. Two straight podiums, back-to-back weekends. The Mercedes looks quick, but it is clearly not the quickest car. But he is just delivering those results, clearly outperforming Kimi Antonelli, the team leader at Mercedes now. I think George Russell has been very underrated to start this year, and I think he's going to keep it going in Japan.
yeah, George Russell's been fantastic. Outperforming Kimi. I think a lot of people kind of thought Kimi was going to come in there and be even with George. I know we're only 2 rounds into the season, but George has done a great job and kind of definitely leading the teammate battle there.
Yeah, and that's not people's fault for thinking that. Certain media sources, not us, this would never be us, but some people were hyping Kimi Antonelli up as the next Max Verstappen. And so if he falls short of that, don't blame Kimi Antonelli. But we at the Podium Pushers, us wheel knowers here, we knew that George Russell was going to be the team leader at Mercedes. I didn't even mention this. Brandon, you're currently leading 7-4, so congrats to you. I need to get some good predictions this week. So I got to catch up. Backmarker of the weekend, who have you got?
I've got Nico Hulkenberg. First of all, that car's just slow, and
That's it.
I
That's all I need
think
to say.
yeah,
Sauber's
yeah. I
terrible,
mean,
and we're done.
yeah, that's really it. But I mean, it's just I think it's slow car, difficult to drive, and it's gonna be a tough weekend for Nico.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just the Suzuka is a demanding circuit, and if that Sauber is as slow as we think it is, it's not going to be able to keep up at that circuit. I've gone with Pierre Gasly as my back marker of the weekend. To me, Alpine have been the most disappointing team this season, and if you look back to last year, they were pretty horrible at Suzuka. And I know that that car is supposedly much improved. They haven't really shown it this year, off the heels of a DSQ in China. Unfortunately, I do not think that Pierre Gasly is going to bounce back this weekend in Japan.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate disqualification for Pierre. And of course, Jack Doohan was not really close to the points either. So disappointing weekend for Alpine in China, but we'll see what happens.
Hey, but no one is praying harder than Jack doing that Franco Colapinto ends up in that Racing Bulls. So, yeah, we'll see what happens with Alpine. Our pole predictions, I have gone with Oscar Piastri on pole. We saw him out qualify Lando Norris last weekend. I think that he's pretty good at Japan. He got his first P2 here at Japan, his rookie season. And so I think he's going to keep the good vibes rolling. I think he's going to keep the Japan success rolling. I think we're going to see Oscar Piastri on pole this weekend.
I think that's a great pick. Oscar has looked better and better. And honestly, I love watching him race. He's calm, cool, and collected. He's a fun guy. Um, I mean, at least he seems like a fun guy. I don't know him personally, but I would love to. So, Oscar, if you're watching this, please reach out. My poll prediction, this was a tough one for me, but I'm going with George Russell. I think George was really close, obviously, in China, and he's been really quick. Mr. Saturday has been doing well on Saturday. So I'm going with George Russell.
Hey, it wouldn't surprise me. We saw George Russell pull some poles out of nowhere last year, so it would not surprise me at all. He is Mr. Saturday. So if there is a chance, who's to say that George Russell doesn't do it? Our podium predictions in P3, I have gone with Lando Norris. It's just so hard for me to predict against the McLarens right now. They look like the fastest car, but they keep making mistakes as a team. Clearly, they're not bulletproof. And so I think Lando Norris is going to do well enough to end up on the podium. But I really don't think he'll be competing for the win this year or this weekend. I just guaranteed that Lando Norris will win the Japanese Grand Prix. But in my predictions, I put Lando Norris in P3.
Yeah, it's so hard to predict who is going to be at the top. That's why I've gone with George Russell. I know I just predicted him to be on pole. I think that Mercedes race pace just isn't quite up there with the McLarens. And I just think George is probably going to get overtaken on track. So finishing P3.
Yeah, with the craziness of the season, the only thing that seems guaranteed right now is a George Russell P3. So that's probably a pretty good prediction. In P2, I have gone with Max Verstappen. This would be great for your podium pusher of the weekend, but should that happen and I get this point right, I don't really care. Uh, we've really said it all already. I think Japan is one of Max Verstappen's best tracks. I think he's in great form right now. They just had that Red Bull emergency meeting, so who knows if they are going to figure stuff out with the car. I don't really think so. But I think Max Verstappen is going to bring home another P2 this weekend.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick. I was really struggling whether or not to put Max in P3 or George in P3. Ultimately, I went with George. But in P2, I have Lando Norris. I know you just said it all a second ago, but I think Lando is going to be quick for some reason. I just don't think he's going to get the win this weekend, but hopefully he'll get P2.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that one. In P1, I have gone with Oscar Piastri. So 3 weeks in a row, three McLaren victories. We had all this talk about this being the closest season of Formula One ever. Unfortunately, I think the Constructors' Championship is probably not going to be close. I do think McLaren probably have that one in the bag. But as far as Drivers' Championships go, we see Oscar Piastri win this race, win two in a row. I mean, he's right there behind or tied with Lando Norris. He could even take the lead of the World Championship with that early in the season. And so I think the Drivers' Championship has to be wide open. I think Oscar Piastri needs to make a statement early in the season saying that he really is a championship contender. So I think he is going to win the third race of the season, take P1 at the Japanese Grand Prix.
I agree with that. I'm also predicting Oscar to win the race. Yeah, you really said it all. Oscar is a quick driver, and this is one of his best tracks, a track that he knows very well, and he's driven at a lot in the past. So I think that Oscar's going to win this weekend too.
Well, I'm glad we agree. As always, when we agree, sorry for your DNF out, Oscar. That one's probably on us. We'll go ahead and apologize right now. But maybe our powers will like cancel each other out, and he will actually win. We'll have to see what happens with that one. Our one push and prediction. My push and prediction is that Kimi Antonelli is not out qualified by any midfield drivers. And you may be thinking to yourself, Justin, that's not bold at all. He's in a Mercedes. Okay, here's the deal. He got knocked out in Q1 in Australia and then was out qualified by Isaac Hadjar in China. So technically, he's been out qualified by a midfield driver every race he's done in Formula One. So if this happens, seems pretty bold to me. So that's my prediction.
Yeah, I think that's a great prediction. Kimi has shown flashes of being really quick in qualifying. I think there's just a lot of raw pace there. He needs to kind of refine it a little bit. Kimi's just going to get better with time. So I think that's a great prediction. My one push and prediction is that both Mercedes and Racing Bulls are going to earn double points finishes. Racing Bulls has kind of had a rough start to the season strategy-wise, but I think they're going to bounce back. Whoever is in that car, whether it's Yuki or Liam, Yuki, obviously, it's his home race. I think he'd do really well there and have a lot of support. So I think that would will him to do well in the Racing Bull car. And if it is Liam Lawson, you know what? I think Liam will probably bounce back. And that car is, I think, a lot easier to drive than the Red Bull. Maybe not quite as quick as the Red Bull, but quick enough to score points. That's for sure. We've seen the qualifying pace in that car. So I think Mercedes and Racing Bulls both earn double points finishes.
I feel like the Mercedes is a lock unless we have some reliability or an absolutely insane race. The Racing Bulls is dangerous because they could be running P4 and P6 and they'll say, you know what, there's 4 laps left. Let's bring them in for softs. And they finish P11 and P13. So, I mean, that is a dangerous prediction. Could you imagine the absolute scenes if Liam Lawson ends up in that car and they have a double points finish and Yuki Tsunoda finishes like P14 in that Red Bull? Could you imagine the situation that Red Bull will have gotten themselves in at that point?
You know what? With all the crazy things that Red Bull has gone through these last couple of years, I feel like that's probably the likely scenario with this one.
It's probably the scenario they deserve at this point because they're on a streak of like 5 drivers just absolutely ruining their careers right now. And maybe it's all Max Verstappen's fault. He's just too dang good, and that's the problem that Red Bull really is facing. The fans pushing predictions at JJ_WT says Max Verstappen wins. At M exclamation point says McLaren stays top two. And at Don Elon Musk says Liam Lawson finishes P16, which is probably realistic, whichever car he's driving.
Yeah, that's a great prediction in the last one. P16 is a safe bet for Liam.
Absolutely unbelievable stuff. Sorry, Liam, we didn't mean to dog on you so much this episode. It is just unfortunately the tune of Formula One right now. But that is all we've got for this episode. That is our full predictions for the Japanese Grand Prix. Before we get out of here, Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts?
I'm excited to see what happens with this Red Bull seat. Will Liam be in the car? Will he not? If Liam stays, this is finally a track that he has driven at before and performed, well at in junior categories. So could we see an uptick in form if Liam's in the Red Bull?
He's even
So
driven here in Formula One before. He drove there in 2023, replacing Daniel Ricciardo, and outperformed Yuki Tsunoda. Had that crazy on-track battle with him and ended up ahead. So I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens for him. There's always something Brandon's excited to watch. And yeah, it's going to be a great week in Japan. I cannot wait. Brandon cannot wait. Together, we're thankful for each and every one of you guys that watch or listen to our podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, do all of the things before you go. We appreciate you so much letting us talk to you about Formula One. We will see you next to recap the Japanese Grand Prix. But until then, have a great day and God bless.
See you.